All right, guys, we're going to start the show shortly. We're going to lead the show when we do start it with Alex Erpy, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, to talk some big-time news on an all-timer drug that is sorely needed, something we've been looking for a long time. This gentleman follows it very closely. A nice little price tag on this, but I don't want to marginalize the innovation that medicine is doing here. If you have anyone in your family with Alzheimer's, you know how devastating this disease can be, especially as the memory fades with our loved ones. So we're going to talk about this with Alex Erpy. We've had some questions for Alex. We missed him last week as he made the trip to the Big Apple. We love this guy and this family tremendously. One of the things that has come up is the Reddit stocks. I mean, you can't turn on any piece of financial news these days without seeing some kind of commentary on GameStop, AMC, and these meme stocks that are dominating the news cycle. So the question is AMC or GameStop a good buy? Should we trade the Reddit stocks? I also have this question for Alex about gold, and if gold is a good inflation or is a good hedge against inflation. So those questions have come in for the Chief Executive Officer of Emergent Financial Services. The Democratic primary is going on today. We broke some news yesterday about a drip bar coming to Water Street in downtown Charlottesville. I got text messages from reporters from both TV stations asking me for the contact information of the owners of the Drip Bar after they watched the show yesterday. So you'll see the Drip Bar owners on the news esta noche. A lot to cover on the I Love CVille show. We'll start with a UVA baseball update. I'm following the box score. Our guest, Alex Erpy, is a proud UVA alum. So
yeah, I'm following the box score too.
He's following it as well. It's the bottom of the 8th inning, 3-3 tie, UVA and ODU with the trip to the Super Regionals on the line. Give the show a like and a share anywhere you are watching. The show will start in T-minus 15 seconds. Judah Wickhauer, let's rock and roll, baby. Oye, ¿qué pasa? And welcome to the I Love CVille show, guys. My name is Jerry Miller. We are live in Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille network. I got my good friend Alex Erpy moments away on the broadcast. I love the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. In fact, I love the entire Erpy family. A lot we're going to cover with this man who has a big, beautiful brain, including an all-timer drug that is just getting released. It's got a hefty price tag, but boys and girls, a drug that is certainly needed in this world. We have all been struck, most likely, by this disease in some capacity. $56,000 per year price tag. We'll break it down with Alex. We will talk the Reddit stocks. We'll talk AMC and GameStop. And if gold is a good hedge against inflation, all that and more on the I Love CVille show. Folks, first I want to go to the UVA baseball box score, which my good buddy Alex Erpy is tracking on his phone literally right now. 3-3 it's looking like in the bottom of the 8th inning. ODU and Virginia tied at 3. This game was supposed to happen yesterday but was postponed due to rain and inclement weather. A trip in the Super Regionals on the line for Brian O'Connor and the boys this summer. We'll follow the box score closely. Of course, we'll give some love to Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. Dr. Wagner has your back. Ting Fiber Internet, a proud sponsor of this program as well. Crazy fast internet, Ting Fiber Internet. Judah Wickhauer, our director. Let's go right off the top, my boy, to Alex, who is on the line. First, good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jerry. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Fresh from the Big Apple, Alex. Tell us about the trip.
It was very nice. Got to see some family for the first time in a long while. And it's always nice to just be able to, the Big Apple, I mean, the one thing you have to say about New York is the food there. They have every conceivable kind of food in copious quantities, especially, both my Cuban side and my Italian side really enjoy going there because the desserts and everything. My dad talked about it in the show last week. There's a place called Villa Bata, which is like a classic Italian bakery that has all such good cannolis and all the classic foods. So it was definitely enjoyable for the stomach and the soul just to see my abuelita and all the family.
Did Xavier, Mrs. Earpy, and the brothers all make the trip?
Oh yeah, the Yerbies got in our vehicle, made the trip, and made it back down safe and sound.
What is the trip like in the vehicle with the Earpy family and the family car going up to New York City from Charlottesville? What's that conversation like?
Oh, it's an endless series of conversations because there's talking going on, there's music going on occasionally, which we'll play. Sometimes we'll listen to our own music, but sometimes there will be we'll play off somebody's iPod and get one of our playlists going with all we have a combination, some 70s songs, some 80s songs, some 50s songs, a lot of Frank Sinatra in the Earpy charts. We like our classic, what do they call them? Oldies, our oldies.
Okay, well, I got to ask you, how was the Big Apple looking? 2 questions here. Was it your first trip to New York City since COVID? And the second part of this question is, New York City, the world city here, how was the mood, the vibe, and the temperature on the street?
Yeah, first trip since basically we hit rock bottom with the COVID and everything being closed. I mean, certainly some things looked like they were opening more, but you could see a little bit, I'd say, of the residual damage in the sense of, particularly we noticed in the church bulletin, if you notice, always a good way to see who's around the local business wise. A lot of empty spots, like blank spots in the church bulletin up in New York, so telling me that a lot of small businesses could no longer afford to advertise or don't exist anymore and have not resumed advertising. So you could see a little bit of the residual damage. And this was in Staten Island. We spent some time there in the Brooklyn, Queens area. You could see the residual damage, but a lot of hope. I was seeing things were definitely moving and opening up again in terms of just the stores, the people. So I think their reopen date fully is, I think July 1st is 100% reopened in New York. So you could see things, I think, ratcheting up to that point, but you could definitely see where small businesses were hurt.
How's mi amigo Xavier in the city? I mean, is he just like a kid on Christmas?
Xavier está bien. Y a él le encanta. I think he likes he likes especially the variety of food. He likes to see family. He'll get to go with my mom to the Italian stores and the specialty stores. So he really likes that part. And then he got to see his mom for the first time in a long while. So that was a real pleasure. His mom, and then even one of the little ones, because my abuelita, she's lucky enough that she now has, I think, 5 great grandchildren.
Wow.
So she's my abuela, but she's actually bisabuela to 5. So we got to meet one of our little cousins that we haven't seen in a while. So she was very happy to have 4. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 4 generations in one. 4 generations in one house.
That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. We'll talk some shop. The news, I'm watching it right now in the studio right here. The news is on an Alzheimer's drug by Biogen that is facing some tough questions. It has got a hefty price tag. But
Indeed.
before we go down the price tag questions, open-ended. The who, what, when, where, why of what you're tracking with a drug that I think could bring a lot of peace, a lot of quality of life. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting approval because, I mean, first off, just the positivity, that's the first approved Alzheimer's drug in 20 years. So that's definitely a lot of hope. And I know Alzheimer's Association and other advocacy groups had been hoping for something like this for a while. The interesting thing, even from a financial perspective, is how this came about, because typically when you're talking FDA approval, what you're looking for, one of the big hurdles is always efficacy trials. In other words, when you do a trial, you have a large percentage of people that seem to show some kind of result. And in Alzheimer's, the result you're looking for is either cognitive improvement or the decline slows down. So either it reverses, you start to get some memory back, or your decline is slowed by the drug. And the interesting thing here is that the trials for this they didn't have huge results in terms of what you're seeing in symptoms. What they had, however, was there's a certain protein that going into science where the high levels of this protein are correlated with Alzheimer's, and it removed a lot of this protein from the brain. So basically what you had the FDA do in this case was say, we're going to give you a chance to sell this drug and begin delivering this drug to people because we see that it reduces something that is known to cause Alzheimer's, even though we don't yet have full data that it's effective in terms of reducing symptoms. In other words, there's a hope that if you do this, people with early stage will then not have late symptoms later on of Alzheimer's. And that's a really big sea change, because we don't really see that a lot from the FDA. Really outside of COVID vaccines,
right. We only saw with COVID.
This kind of, exactly, yeah. Which, that's like once in 100 years. You don't often see that kind of fast track. Well, we're really not going to wait till we have all the trial data. We're going to let you run with this. And so the FDA did that this time, and that sort of changes the game in terms of how we approach biotech just for investing, because now you have to be looking not only, I have to wait till phase 3 data before I make a move on this, because the FDA themselves may not wait till phase 3 clinical trials. They may say, we know that this drug serves this purpose and it works in this sense by changing some factor of the body, and we'll run with that even though we don't yet know that it'll result in people's having different symptoms or a disease changing course, which is really interesting to look at.
I have a lot of questions for you on this. First question is this: is it a direct correlation that COVID vaccinations were fast-tracked to solve a pandemic? And that had success. We've had success with that, alleviating this pandemic that everyone has felt. We've had success with that. Can we make the correlation because of the success of these Johnson & Johnsons, these Modernas, these Pfizers with COVID, that perhaps the FDA is more open-minded to fast-tracking this?
I think an indirect correlation. I would say that, and the fact that this has been pushed for a long time. So Europe is very far ahead of us in terms of their willingness to fast-track therapies, particularly when talking about orphan drugs where there's not a lot of people that have the disease, or if you're talking drugs where you're going to die, basically, if you don't take something, so you are willing to be a little more experimental in what you take. I don't know what the technical scientific term for that is, but Europe is typically a much quicker process than the United States, than the FDA has been. And I think that, for a long time, the push there, plus, like you said, the fact that the emergency use worked in this case, perhaps had led the FDA to say, you know what, in this particular case, we're going to go ahead, because they're basically saying to this company, you're going to start give us a new trial now, but we're going to let you sell this drug while your phase 3 trial is ongoing. And just to be clear to everyone out there, phase 3 is not safety testing. So the FDA is not approving this drug and then saying we'll find out if it's dangerous or has terrible side effects later. That's already been done. What we're talking about now is, does it work to the percentage that the FDA wants it to work? And the FDA is basically saying, we'll let you go out there and give this drug to people before we have found that out for certain. But so it's contingent in the future. Obviously, if the trial fails, the FDA may pull this. But for now, they're saying go ahead and give it a shot.
You're the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, one of the best financial services firms in this country. Okay, no doubt about it. I'm going to throw this to you here. Why did you say earlier in this interview, as someone who is advising people on their investments, we have to wait till the phase 3 data before we can choose to invest in this company?
So I would say, no, it's not a matter of waiting for phase 3 data. It's that the phase 3 data typically is what makes a determination. In other words, you invest as an investor prior to that. But typically, you're not going to see a major move until you start getting phase 3, because that's when the FDA is going to make their call.
Okay.
So as an investor, you'll make a decision prior to that, particularly if you're looking at a small company. But there's not going to be a move until then, typically. What this does is now it sort of changes your time horizon, because You could have a company suddenly get FDA approval, and you're sitting there saying, well, there is no phase 3 data, or phase 3 data was inconclusive, but it got approved anyway. So it changes what may happen post investment. But typically you'll make a decision on a company, unless there's a different reason why you're investing. If you're sitting there saying, I like this company's pipelines, you're probably going to be investing before you have data on all the phase 3 trials.
Analysts on the street expected the price tag for this drug to check in between $10K and $25K. We find out today it's over $56,000 annually for this drug. As a result, Biogen is facing a little heat right now. Do we focus on this price tag? Is that something that is a legitimate focus point? Or are we thinking, look, it's going to eventually go down as the supply increases or as more players get in the field? Let's not focus on the price tag. Let's just focus on the innovation that we may have a potential solution here.
And I think so. It is definitely a hefty price tag, especially when you also combine that it's going to have to be there are going to have to be brain scans that go along with this to test for side effects,
Wow.
which cost money to have those done on someone. The one thing I would say, so from the analyst I've been reading, the research I've been looking at, typically the price tags of these are going to be mostly covered by people's insurance. The one, and because Medicare and Medicaid is people who are probably going to be mostly taking this. And they have a lot of supplemental advantage plans where the deductibles are not very high. So typically it's going to be mostly covered by Medicare and Medicaid. The people who may get hit are if you have a private insurance and you have a high deductible and you're not currently using that. In other words, you haven't yet hit that number. You're going to have to hit that number before insurance kicks in to pay for this thing. So you could conceivably be talking $12,000 a year if your deductible is that high and you're not currently using it with other expenses that you would shell out for this. And it always is a concern with new drugs. The one thing that's a little different in this case than as compared to COVID vaccines were heavily funded by the government, so there wasn't a really big R&D to go into that. Hence, we're now seeing it free on the other end as the government's basically saying, well, I'll buy it from you. They're basically begging us to take them. The flip side here is the government was not funding this, so you're talking a lot. You're talking millions, potentially billions of dollars that go into funding this. My suspicion also, you've got Biogen's looking at this and saying, well, if the trial results that we're on a basis here for don't pan out, FDA could potentially pull this. So they may be trying to recoup some of that R&D faster rather than saying we have a 7 to 10 year window. They may be looking at and saying, well, we really only have a 2 to 3 year window if something doesn't go right. Because I know they've said the price won't rise for 4 years.
Very good explanation.
My suspicion is once the patent is no longer protected, the price will drop. So these is always a balancing act. You want to balance the positivity of the great improvement with the fact that it is costly, because just having seen and followed biotech companies, it is a costly process. It's a very long and very expensive process to get a drug to market. So they're trying to recoup some of their cost as quickly as possible.
So I come into a Merchant Financial Services office, anybody does, okay, and we come in there and we bring this up with you. Your response and your advice to all of us.
My advice typically is the same as I usually do. So if you're the average investor, someone looking to save for retirement, in other words, you don't have $10 million and you want to put it to work somewhere, you're talking high net worth individual, anyone from $50,000 to a couple million that you have saved for your retirement. You're not going to be doing a one-off company like Biogen. But you are, I do advise people, and we do tell people, biotech is something to look at. And perhaps in a broader spectrum, there are ways to invest in it across more companies than just one. But you're talking something that, I think has great potential for growth. These are game changers. Like when you're talking biotech, this isn't Coca-Cola coming out with a new soda.
Right.
This is something that can change the way
world.
Energy works, change the way people's health works, save lives. And it also, I think, has that good feel-good component to it. That, there's a lot of investments out there. When you invest in the S&P 500 or in a very large swath of U.S. stocks, sometimes people will say, well, I'm not crazy about what this company does. It doesn't really interest me, but it's a broad investment. It's a diversified investment. It'll grow. And then with the money I make from investing, I can give to charities that I believe in. In the case of biotech, you now have that sort of built in. Xavier and I have talked about ESG a couple of times as Vanessa sent us that great question.
Vanessa Parkhill.
This kind of fits into that ESG category because you're investing in something that has the potential to really improve people's lives. So it has both a great story and I think it has great potential. So you definitely want it as part of your portfolio, even if you're not, we wouldn't advise people, the average investor to try to pick a winner out there.
Guys, Alex Erpy, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, Xavier and Alex host Today y Mañana, Thursday mornings at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network, a fantastic program that you guys gotta watch and schedule and earmark. Couple more questions for you. Our buddy Judah, we were talking about this, the director of the program before the show. We actually had these questions come in for you as well. We had a question about gold and whether it's a hedge against inflation. And then we had another question. I mean, dude, I can't turn on CNBC. I can't pick up any kind of financial news or publication or anything like that without hearing AMC, without hearing GameStop. I mean, these Reddit boards are swinging the markets. I'm watching Jim Cramer on Squawk on the Street this morning, and he says anybody that is shorting AMC and GameStop and going against these Reddit boards is an absolute moron. I mean, he basically said those right that on Squawk on the Street this morning. So let me get out of your way. Judah, this is something that we were talking about today. AMC and GameStop. A lot of folks, especially the folks that are like our age, that are digital and social media and constantly on their phones following this, are dipping their toes, riding the wave, piecing out, and making some good money here. What do you think about this?
So I sort of view these as the equivalent of your gambling in a sense. It's a slightly more educated gambling.
How so?
In the sense of this, you have to be willing to lose the money is always the catch. In other words, never invest something into an individual stock or on the basis of a Reddit or something like this with money that is either going to be funding your retirement or that you can't afford to lose. So you can take that 2% of your portfolio and say, all right, if I've got 98% of my portfolio in a diversified portfolio, I'm willing to lose 2%. And if that's the case, then you can, because then it sort of frees you from a lot of those behavioral aspects that we all have, the regret aversion. I don't want to sell this because I'll regret it. I don't want to buy this because if it goes down, I'll regret it. I don't want to have to let other people know that I picked this stock and it didn't do well. There's a lot of behavioral biases that we have as people that can hurt us when we try to invest in individual stocks. And we can sort of cut those away if we're not investing something that we're really tied to an amount that will really impact us. So that 1 to 2% of your portfolio, and I'd say two things when really playing this kind of market in terms of, because we're basically talking really short term. This isn't, you don't buy a GameStop and hold it for 5 years at this point.
Sure.
These moves are happening really quickly.
We're talking like day to day, week to week.
Exactly, day to day, week to week. And the two things is watch yourself in terms of your biases. And that's just in terms of emotional things that we can get caught up with. In other words, you read on Reddit, buy AMC. You as the investor really have to take the time, look at that, and say, do I believe in the logic that is being employed here? Because if you're doing it just on the basis of, well, Reddit's been successful before and maybe they are again, you're not going to have the right confidence in it to be able to make the decisions as to when to go in and out. So that's the first thing, because then you're going to be at the sway of, oh, Reddit's saying I should sell. Do I really sell today? Unless you've got to make sure that you've put the work in and the research to say, do I either have real confidence in this or not? Because otherwise you're going to fall into that classic tech boom trap of because there's a lot of big, classic investors that they say, when my friend down the street who's not in investing starts telling me to buy something, that's when I sell it.
Right, of course. Yeah.
It's usually the opposite of whatever the winds are blowing, right? So if you don't want to fall into that trap, you have to really do the research yourself and say, do I buy this logic? Then the second thing always to keep in mind when you're dealing with these types of portfolios is one trick always to have is maybe don't put it all in one shot. In other words, figure out how much you're willing to invest. If it's $1,000, say, maybe don't put all 1,000 in the moment the Redditors tell you go in, right? Maybe you put in 300, watch what happens. If it climbs down a little, but you're still buying the logic, put your second tranche in, right? So now you have three tranches. If you split $1,000 into three $330 tranches, you now have sort of three opportunities to use your smarts, use your wits, see what's happening, try to figure out, is there an ulterior motive here? Are these Redditors, is the guy promoting this serious about making money this time, or does he have somewhat of a personal, a lot of the initial GameStop was almost a personal reaction to, well, we don't like what these short sellers are doing.
It was.
We're going to try to pull this squeeze.
Right.
But that means that the average person can sometimes be left holding the bag if you're the last one out of the short squeeze. So you really got to be in there and say, all right, am I taking the right precautions? Am I looking at the logic of this? Does it make sense? Is it a naked short versus another kind of short? So because GameStop was really successful, this is what we call a naked short, meaning there were more shares sold short of GameStop than actually existed. So that enabled it to happen. But sometimes people make the mistake, because we've seen this in a couple instances since then, of saying, well, I'm going to try this with another shorted company, but it's not shorted naked, meaning there are enough shares for people to go out and buy and cover their shorts. In which case, if you try to pull a squeeze, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work there, yeah.
Because the shorters just go out there, buy the stock, and they're good.
Right.
So you have to really do your research and say, all right, is this something that I think will actually work, or is it not? Because you can't. Reddit is such a large subforum, you can't 100% rely on everything that's coming out of there.
Okay, I love talking with you here. I got so many follow-ups for you. The financial chat rooms, which is essentially what these Reddit boards are, this is nothing new. Financial chat rooms have existed since you and I were kids. Before that, you had the groups of heavy hitters that would get together over dinner and say, hey, how about this one and this one and this one? And,
hey, you'd have the Kramers themselves. You'd go watch Mad Money and get your stock pitch from there.
Okay, exactly. Okay, so here's what I'm saying. Here's the question. Why is this having such a large impact on the markets today when this has been happening for so long? Is it just the massive amount of people that are organized and aggregated on the Reddit boards? Is that what it is?
I think it's the size of that. I think perhaps the stimulus of the past couple of years gave people a little more money to play with. There was a little bit more interest in some of these Robinhoods that you can have people go in individually. I mean, it used to be a little more complicated. Let's say you wanted to pull something like this off as the average investor. By the time you opened a brokerage account to then put your money in, to then buy the stock, you're talking 3-4 days. Well, now the opportunity is gone. Now you can open a brokerage account at a Fidelity or Robinhood
5 minutes.
in hours, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You can pull it off. And that enables you to get in there, fund it with an electronic transaction, and then trade that day. You don't even have to wait for an ACH to settle. You're talking Fidelity will basically credit you a 500, you would say, I want to transfer 500. Fidelity says, I'm going to pretend that you already have this 500, go trade it.
Merrill does that as well.
Exactly. You can move much more quickly. The price, obviously, is, as we saw with Robinhood, getting out is much different than getting in. It can be, in other words, if they want to play these games and prevent you from buying something, they can do that. So there's a little catch-22. I mean, the speed at which you can do this also has repercussions there. But I think that's a lot of why we're seeing this kind of impact. More attention being paid to it, more publicity, more people able to mobilize quickly.
Why would, this is a question for you here, why would any of these big-time hedge funds continue to short these stocks? Why would they challenge these Redditors? Is that the right term? Redditors?
Redditors, yeah. I think that's what it's tricky. I think in some cases, right, they don't know, the hedge fund doesn't know in advance which one Reddit's going to really latch onto, because
it's computers.
GameStop, AMC, in the news, there are thousands of shorted companies out there, even right now. I mean, I've been even just in biotech that we were talking about, you don't know how many hundreds of biotech stocks are routinely shorted. under the expectation that basically they will fail.
I guess a more pointed follow-up question here. We know AMC and GameStop have been in the news constantly, yet these hedge funds continue to short these positions.
Oh, well, so that's so slightly different. One, I think they have confidence that it will die down. In other words, sooner or later, they will, people will lose interest and the stock will decline again. Sometimes they may have, remember, in Reddit, we may have a legitimate belief that GameStop and AMC are good companies and will go forward. There are some hedge funds out there that may legitimately be sitting there saying AMC is movie theaters. It's a dying business. It will not come back from COVID, and I don't believe that it will. So in other words, they may have a legitimate belief themselves that the stock is actually not worth anything, and therefore they will keep the short on because they're sitting there saying, I think this stock is going all the way down to zero because it's a dying business. I'm not going to pull my short because it's temporarily been boosted by Redditors who have a different opinion than them. And then third, it's not so easy, depending on if it's a naked short, it's not so easy to unwind the short.
Understood.
So sometimes the best option may be to just hope that you pull out of this alive because you can't actually unwind your position. So it's a combination of things, but it's not necessarily, I think our first inclination is to say it's arrogance, and I'm not saying there's none, but I think there also can be legitimate reasons why someone shorting a stock would say, I still think, I don't care what Reddit says, I still think this stock is a dying business and will go to zero. I'm not going to pull my short.
Well, I mean, and also like the risk of having your fund, your brand tied to shorting these stocks. Next thing you know, these Redditors are going to do more research on these funds and figure out what other stocks they're trying to short and then go after those positions because we've seen that happen.
We have seen that happen. And part of that, though, does depend on what happens to the Redditors. If they lose, I mean, the way a short squeeze always works, right? If you lose the short squeeze, in other words, if the hedge fund lives and the stock price begins to decline again, the Redditors holding the last bit of shares, the ones who don't get out early enough,
screwed.
You get screwed. You're done. Your funds are done. So you can't go back really and do it again because you lost everything. So they may be sitting there thinking, well, if we survive this, it's not going to happen again with another one. It could be their investors are still confident saying, hey, you know what? I believed in you as a hedge fund because of your managerial skill. I'm not going to stop believing in your skill because you're the target of a group of Redditors. I think long term, you're still going to give me alpha. You're still going to outperform the market. So as long as the investors backing the hedge fund are still confident, the hedge fund's going to say, I'm going to do what I think I do best. And I'm not going to change what I do best because a bunch of people have decided they don't like me because they don't like the way I do business. So it's partly that as well, I think.
The final question that we want to learn about today, Mañana, will give you a UVA baseball update. In fact, if you have the box score in front of you, can you give us the UVA baseball update? Because I don't.
I'm pulling it up from NCAA.com. What do we got here?
Alex Erpy's a proud UVA graduate.
3-3, top of the 10th.
No way, it's 3-3 in the top of the 10th inning. God, a trip on the Super Regionals on the line for Brian O'Connor.
That's what I needed more UVA stress.
Yeah, I know.
Between the lacrosse championship that they were holding on for dear life with 10 seconds left. Now I have a top of the 10th baseball game.
Top of the 10th, Alex Erpy with the Stuart Scott-like update here on the I Love CVille show. All right, this question has come in for you. I love if you have questions for Alex, you can send them to me and we will save them for when he's on the show on Tuesdays. He is an open book who is super, super smart. This question was gold. Should we get into gold? Do you see it as a hedge against inflation, or is it just an archaic currency that's not going to appreciate and grow anymore?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. We get it a lot, actually, and it's something we think about a lot, I have to say. So gold is a hedge against inflation. So it does work. In other words, when inflation goes up a lot, you do see the price of gold rise. The question is if it's the best use of your funds to hedge against inflation. In other words, am I better off going gold, or do I just keep my portfolio diversified with stocks and bonds, maybe throw in some TIPS, some inflation-protected securities, so those are bonds that the interest rate goes up as inflation goes up? Do I keep that and stay away from the volatility of gold? In other words, are there ways to get an inflation hedge that don't necessarily involve going into gold? Because the one catch with gold is it's an expensive hedge.
Exactly.
And what I mean by that is there's three ways that you hedge with gold. One is you buy physical gold.
Yeah.
Which that's a 30% haircut at the beginning. And as we joked with Judah, Judah had the perfect analogy that, like, if things really go south, are you really going to scrape off? Like, how do you sell a piece of a bar of gold?
Right. How do you sell your gold coins?
It's not very liquid.
Right.
Right. You either sell all of it or you sell none of it. So that's very difficult. Your second option is you buy gold companies, right? Gold miners, things like that. But that's not really buying gold. You're sort of an indirect hedge. You're hoping that if the price of gold goes up, gold miners go up. That's not always the case. There was, back in 2010, 2011, there was a little bit of a despair. Gold went up for a little bit, but you didn't necessarily want to be in gold miners, because sometimes you may pick a gold mining company that their mine runs dry and everybody else is doing great, and now you're sitting there saying, I have a loss on this company and the price of gold is through the roof. So it's an imperfect hedge. And then the last one is gold futures. Because when you go on there, so a lot of people think that you go to the stock market, you find like a gold ETF. You know, a lot of times they have like GLD in the name. GLD gold is the ticker. And that means you're literally buying gold. And it's not really the case. What you're buying is futures contracts for gold. So in other words, contracts that promise a delivery of gold in the future for price today. Right? And the problem is that those are expensive because they have to be constantly rolled over. So to give you an analogy, basically, let's say you buy $1,000 worth of a gold ETF as a hedge. And inflation, let's say inflation ticks up a little bit, but the price of gold doesn't move. It stays flat. Well, you're losing about 1 to 2% a year because of the cost of the hedge, the cost of the leverage in this ETF that's futures contracts. So basically what that means is to use gold as a hedge against inflation, you got to be right. And you got to be really right, because otherwise you're paying a lot for this protection. You're paying 1 to 2%, insurance money for this hedge. So what we typically tell people is there are probably, especially if you talk to a financial advisor, there's probably other ways to hedge and just really be diverse with your portfolio that are better than gold. But I won't come out and deny that gold is, if gold goes up. My portfolio, it may not be the best hedge out there.
Alex Erpy, guys, dropping knowledge here on the I Love CVille show. CEO of Emergent Financial Services, co-host with Xavier Erpy of Today y Mañana, Thursday at 10:15 a.m. My friend, what is happening on Thursday?
Oh, Thursday's going to be a lot of fun. So we've got two guests. Our first guest is going to be Dave Garcia. He's the owner of Kitchen Catering. Okay. It's great, and his food is incredible. We had him. He used to cater for Adelante occasional times. And plus Kitchen Catering, also they have Kitchenette, which is they make sandwiches that you can
The sandwich shop.
Sandwich shop. So good. So delicious. And so they've got a new location he's going to be telling us about. And just what they're up to, what's the catering's up to. So it's going to be a lot of fun. He's a fun guy, Dave. And then we're going to have Christina De Maria. She's the director of the Charlottesville Opera. And she's going to come on and tell us a little about what's going on with opera. So we'll pair our music with food on the show on Thursday. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Pairing the music with food. It sounds like the Erpy family driving to the Big Apple.
It does. It's exactly that. You can't beat, for us, we're big classical music fans too. So you put on a little, especially Nick, our social media ninja, he loves his opera. So you pair a little Puccini with some good wine and some delicious food, and then you have a match made in heaven.
Please say hi to Nick, hashtag social media ninja Erpy, Xavier, Michael, Mrs. Erpy, the entire clan. We will see you on Thursday.
On Thursday at 10:15.
Thank you, my friend. You have a good one.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. So nice to be on again. I'm glad to be back.
We're glad to have you, Alex. You take care. Alex Erpy, guys, A++ people. Dude, I love the entire Erpy family. I'm telling you right now, like class acts, A+ family. Charlottesville's lucky to have that family. A lot I want to cover on today's program. A lot I want to cover still on today's show. I'm going to give you a UVA baseball update here in a matter of moments. I'm hitting refresh. Good Lord, this team is in extra innings right now. 3-3 in the top of the 10th. 3-3 in the top of the 10th right now. We'll see if we can get closure on this game. So ODU got 1 run in the 6th, 2 runs in the 8th. UVA scores 2 in the 7th, gets an ace on the board in the 8th, 3-3 in the top of the 10th right now. We'll follow that box score closely. A couple things I want to get out before we get out the door. And Alex, you crushed it. The Democratic primary is going on now as we speak. We don't know actual results, but if you go to the Seville Votes Twitter account, you can see some of the turnout numbers. So at the 9 a.m., and I'm looking at these on screen now, I'm going to read them from the Excel spreadsheet, Seville Votes on Twitter. In fact, I will retweet this now on my Twitter account. If you follow me on Twitter, the Carver voting precinct at 9 a.m., 1.5% turnout, 3,636 votes logged. The highest turnout of any voting precinct in Charlottesville, Virginia, the Walker voting precinct, 3.9% at 9 a.m., 3.9% at 9 a.m., nearly 4,100 votes at Walker. You have a 2.8% at Johnson. You would think Johnson is going to go, the Johnson precinct is probably leaning more toward a Pinkston. The 9 a.m. results are important because a lot of people vote before they go to work. You see votes uptick before 9 a.m. and votes uptick after 5:30 p.m. as people get off work. And then you start to see a little bit of a drag in voting turnout in the middle of the workday. So the 9 a.m. turnout at 9 a.m., 31,256 votes at 9 a.m. 31,256 votes at 9 a.m. To put that in comparison, at 9 a.m. 2019, you had 30,731. That means you have roughly, quick math right here, 500 to 600 more votes this primary than compared to 2019. 2017, and remember, 2017 was right after August 12th, okay? In fact, Nakia Walker won right after August 12th as an independent. In 2017 at 9 a.m., you had 29,583. So if you're comparing this year's voter turnout at 9 a.m., this year was 31,256. 2017, fresh from August 12th, 29,583. And then 2019, 30,731. Seville Votes on Twitter is really good with giving us up-to-date results from a turnout standpoint. We'll follow this very closely on the I Love Seville network. In fact, on Friday on Real Talk, Neil Williamson and Sean Tubbs in studio to talk about the Democratic primary. Carl Brown, Brian Pinkston, Juan Diego Wade, 3 dudes get whittled down to 2. Those 2 dudes that get the whittled down to 2, those dudes get sent to the general where they'll face Yaz Washington and Nakia Walker in a general election of epic proportions. Folks, a couple of other items I want to cover here. We broke some news yesterday. Heck, it sounds like Alex and Xavier are going to break some news on Thursday at 10:15 a.m. on Real Talk with the Kitchenette's new location. But we broke some news yesterday about the Drip Bar coming to Charlottesville. Judah, you got those pics? Thank you, my friend. Judah Wickhauer is going to get those on screen. The Drip Bar coming to Water Street under the Water Street parking garage. The Drip Bar, a franchise that's going to be locally owned. This I know the local owners. I'm not going to say who they are. That's up to them to say it. I'm currently coordinating an interview with the local owners who are clients of mine for other businesses that they own in town, established, respectable, market-leading businesses. I'm currently coordinating interviews with them and the traditional news. You will see these local owners on CBS 19 talking about the Drip Bar coming to Water Street. Now, folks, the Drip Bar is more than just, I want to get a misconception out there. A lot of folks thought the Drip Bar was just this way to get over a hangover. After you went out Friday and Saturday night super hard, you go to the Drip Bar the next day, you get the IV treatment, you get the nutrients and the vitamins injected into your body, and bing, bam, boom, you're ready to go. You're not dealing with the hangover, you're not pounding the Gatorade, you're not trying to eat the greasy food, drink the soda to get over the hangover, whatever your hangover cure is. Everyone has their own one. It's much more than that. The Drip Bar is focused on helping people obtain their best health using advances in intravenous therapies. So it's not just the hangover remedy. Let's debunk that misconception. And I'm going to straight up say this. I think the Drip Bar is going to crush it. Alex Urpy just does a post. UVA baseball wins. He puts it in the feed. Alex Urpy, you are the man. UVA baseball wins. Urpy says, Ortiz walk-off homer in the 10th. 4-3, UVA gets the victory. The Wahoos are heading to the Super Regional. This is bananas. This is absolutely bananas. Virginia baseball at the beginning of the season was left on the side of the road like a dead carcass hit by a Mack truck on the side of 250. Today, Brian O'Connor and the boys of summer just get a walk-off homer in the 10th inning. Ortiz, a boom, a bang to out of the park, and now the boys are going to the Super Regional. Brian O'Connor, maybe one of your best coaching jobs you have ever done, and you have a national championship on your resume, Coach O'Connor. We have tremendous respect. Thank you, Alex Urpy, for that update. So UVA is dancing at a Super Regional. Good night. The shortstop for UVA baseball is Nick Kent. He went to St. Anne's Belfield. He grew up in Charlottesville. He's the son of Brian and Missy Kent. I play pickleball with Brian Kent all the time. I play pickleball with Brian Kent all the time. Just a class act. Brian Kent. His wife, beautiful, dynamic. I believe she's a realtor and an exercise instructor. Nick Kent, this kid is growing up in Charlottesville, the starting shortstop for the UVA baseball team, a St. Anne's Belfield Academy product. Boys and girls, you got Connor Schellenberger, who was the superhero for UVA men's lacrosse, a St. Anne's Belfield product, won a national championship. I'm not putting the cart before the horse by any means. I'm not saying this baseball team's going to win a national championship. Maybe they are, maybe they don't. So far, the season has been exceeded expectations, especially where they were at the beginning of the year. One of the key components of this UVA baseball team, a St. Anne's Belfield product as well, the shortstop, Nick Kent, Brian and Missy's son. I love when the local boys do well. Vanessa Parkhill, you're watching. Your son, one of those fantastic local boys that has done well out of St. Anne's Belfield. One more tip, one more item to get out of the notebook. The Drip Bar is coming to Water Street. Water Street Parking Garage. The ownership team behind the Drip Bar is invested locally in this community. In fact, they own a number of businesses that you have undoubtedly heard of. I will let them make that announcement either on this show or on the newscast interview we are coordinating now with all the stations on their behalf. I think this business is going to crush it. I think some folks initially were uncertain, and their reaction was, hey, what is that? You're going in there for needles to get over a hangover. It's much more than that. It is much more than that. Go in there with an open mind. The Drip Bar concept is very prevalent in big cities across America, and I think it's one that is going to crush it, especially when the University of Virginia is in session. I remember when I went to UVA, When I was at UVA 2000 to 2004, we never ventured downtown. I got my first cell phone as a rising third year at Phi Kappa Psi. It was a flip phone. It pretty much could only text, and when I had a text, I had to triple tap the key to get to certain letters. Remember when we used to triple tap a button to get to certain letters on the flip phone? I had the cell phone to call Ma Dukes because the fraternity did not have a phone, and I had a cell phone to text the ladies. That's why I got it rising third year at Phi Kappa Psi. Now students have iPhones, smartphones galore. As a result of this technology, they have access to Uber and Lyft. They have access to bird scooters. And they are coming downtown during the school session in the thousands. In fact, if you ask our clients, some of these restaurant owners of the downtown mall, some of their top purchasing power, their buyer, their customers are the students. So times have very much changed in downtown Charlottesville from when I was a student 2000 to 2004 at UVA to now. Now the students are the demo, a large portion of the buying demographic in downtown Charlottesville because they're getting knowledge on these phones about the watering holes in the restaurants downtown. They get an Uber, Lyfts, or ride bird scooters to get to downtown. And where I'm going with this is the Drip Bar being downtown, I think it's going to crush it, especially when the students are in session and when 20, 25,000 kids are looking to, let's cut to the chase. Party, recover, and party some more. It's not just that, though. It's about keeping your body healthy through IV nutrients. Look for the Drip Bar on the news over the next day or two as we coordinate those interviews. Guys, that's the show. It's the I Love CVille show on the I Love CVille network. We love connecting with you guys through this platform. A beautiful day to be alive in Charlottesville and Central Virginia. Thank you to Alex Erpy for joining us on this program. And Virginia baseball gets this victory, folks. Virginia baseball dancing to a super regional Nick Kett, the Charlottesville and St. Anne's Belfield product, helping lead the charge. I love sports, and I love when the local boys and gals do well at any level. I love seeing the Schellenbergs of the world and the Kents of the world do well at the collegiate level, especially at University of Virginia. Thank you kindly for joining us on a gorgeous Wednesday afternoon. If you're above the mud, you have reason to celebrate and enjoy life. Judah, thank you. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 12:30. Tomorrow at 12:30, we're chatting with Eric and Corey LaFontaine. They are the owners of The Bend Barbecue in Scottsville. Eric and Corey LaFontaine, the owners of The Bend Barbecue in Scottsville, tomorrow in studio on the I Love CVille show. Hasta luego. Take care. UVA baseball.